Lunch with PB&J.
You jerk.
We had technical difficulties, so Joy thought she had some time to kill.
Passing the time.
We are back, and we are in Ruth Chapter 3 today.
Yes.
And Joy, I'm sure, was just finalizing notes.
No, I was sending a text to my son to check the laundry.
You know, this is what working parents have to do.
Yeah, it's real life.
It's real life, folks. I know we come across as celebrities who have servants who do things, but it's really just our kids.
It's really our kids.
So yeah. Sorry. That was fun. All right. So Ruth chapter 3, Joy. That's where we are. It comes after chapter 2. And if you remember, in Ruth chapter 2, Ruth meets Boaz for the first time, and we're introduced to the character of Boaz
Was it
as
love
well.
at first sight?
I don't think so.
Like our experience?
Like our experience when you fell in love with me at first sight?
Yes.
I thought she was cute, but she was so young, guys.
The first thing I remember saying to you is asking for your T-shirt to wipe my
Was that
glasses.
The first thing you said to me? Mm-hmm. That was after we'd been around.
It was raining. That was the first thing I said that we said back to him.
Directly to me.
Yeah. It was raining. My glasses were wet, and I asked for his T-shirt to wipe my glasses.
What a flirt she is. She's such a flirt.
And he said yes.
5 years later, I picked up on the hint that she thought I was cute, and I asked her out. I'm a little slow.
This has nothing to do with Ruth.
No, it really doesn't. Yeah, it wasn't love at first sight necessarily.
No.
Although they did see each other's strong characters, so I think that's a good thing, right? Mm-hmm. So Ruth's character is established. She finds favor with Boaz. He treats her as one of his own household. Now, one of his own household servants, mind you, but still one of his own household. And because she could have been treated as a beggar. If you remember the story, Ruth is a foreigner in the land of Bethlehem. She is from Moab. There's hostility between the two nations. So when she came here with her mother-in-law, Naomi, it would have been very easy for her to be treated as a beggar, but instead she found favor with Boaz. He immediately started caring for her, and he was introduced to him as the kinsman redeemer, or the family redeemer. Connected to Naomi's family. And so he gave her provision, made sure that she and Naomi both had enough food, gave protection to her. He said, I've talked to all the men here, and they know they are not to bother you, not to touch you, not to give you a hard time, not to make any dirty comments, nothing. And so we kind of left off. The end of harvest is coming, so everything is taken care of to get her through the end of harvest season. She has a job, basically. There's food for her and her mom-in-law, but outside of that, we don't know where it's going to go after that. So that's kind of where chapter 2 ends, and we're going to pick up in chapter 3.
And I think too, like, the first time I read Ruth and in reading it in times past, I think the only like parallel that I saw was just this kinsman redeemer or the family redeemer representing, okay, this is Jesus, right? This is a picture. This is an example of what Jesus is to us. But I think for me anyway, as I'm reading through this, just the way we're reading it through so detailed, I just feel like I'm picking up so many more parallels to, okay, this is what Jesus represents for us too, right? It's like you talk about it a lot, that foreshadowing,
right? And
I think I'm seeing that, I don't know, more than just that example of him being the kinsman redeemer, that there's more to it.
It's everything that leads up to it. So you kind of see all those little elements, even in Jesus being our redeemer. You see everything that entails. Yeah. It's not just simply salvation. Yeah. But there's so much more.
And we were talking about it, like there's certain things that are obviously they're not exact, right? But it's like when Jesus would tell a parable in the New Testament, how, you know, it was just like it's a way of explaining something that's such a mystery, right? So I think you find that with Ruth, you just find these details that just point to Jesus. Yeah.
Right. And so if you're just jumping in and you're like, what in the world are you guys talking about? You should go back and listen to the last 2 episodes where we cover Ruth chapter 1, chapter 2. And if you're like, man, how did I miss that? It's probably because you've never subscribed to our podcast. And so you should go ahead and do it right now while you're listening, while you're watching. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button, hit the follow button, whatever you need to do. Give us a thumbs up, a comment, all that good stuff. Then we know you're listening. And you'll never miss anything, okay? So we're going to pick up in Ruth chapter 3, verse 1. It says, one day Naomi said to Ruth, my daughter, it's time that I found a permanent home for you so that you will be provided for. Boaz is a close relative of ours, and he's been very kind by letting you gather grain with his young women. Tonight he will be winnowing barley. That's a fun word to say. He will be winnowing barley at the threshing floor. Now do as I tell you. Take a bath and put on perfume and dress in your nicest clothes. Then go to the threshing floor, but don't let Boaz see you until he has finished eating and drinking. Be sure to notice where he lies down. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down there. He will tell you what to do. I will do everything you say, Ruth replied. So she went down to the threshing floor that night and followed the instructions of her mother-in-law. So it's kind of interesting there. She says in back in verse 1, verse 2, she says, it's time that I find you a permanent home. That phrase, it literally translates to, it's time that I find you rest. And so she wants to find rest. And what Naomi's trying to do is she wanted to make sure that Ruth was cared for permanently. Yeah. Ruth had given up this opportunity. If you remember in chapter 1, when they were on their way back, Ruth's husband had died, who was Naomi's son. And they get halfway back to Bethlehem because Naomi's just like, I got nothing for me in Moab. I need to go back to where I have family and maybe find some help. And then halfway back, she tells her daughter-in-laws, hey, you need to go back to Moab because that's where you're going to find a future and you're more likely to get remarried and all these things. And Ruth says, no, I'm coming with you. And that's the end of it. And so they come. And so Ruth gave up so much to show this loyalty to Naomi, but now Naomi's like, okay, I'm an old woman, and I can't get remarried and give you any kind of help that way, and so it's time that we do something about this to make sure that you have a future as well.
I loved that. I did the same thing where I looked up the meaning of that because it stood out to me. I want to give you I want to find a permanent home for you. And that translation of rest, of a resting place. And it made me just kind of just sparked that thing of like, that's the parallels anyway of like Jesus wants to give us rest. Yeah. He wants to be that resting place for us. And so just like Naomi's like, that is my heart's desire to find you rest. You've been through so much. We've been through so much. And here she is carrying this burden. They're carrying the burden of, their future and all these things. And so it made me think of the verse. So it's Matthew 11:28. Where Jesus says, come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. And so it's just this, Naomi and Ruth were seeking rest. They were seeking a permanent place. They were seeking that. And, it's just that thing of where there's a lot of people, and they may not know they're seeking that, but they are. I mean, they're seeking to belong. They're seeking a place of rest because we're, before Jesus, we're all carrying these burdens that are too heavy. And so Jesus wants to be that place of rest for us. But what I think is cool is not only does he want to be our resting place, but you also see that he wants to rest. He wants a home in us as well. So it's like a vice versa thing where, we can have a home in Jesus and find rest in him, but he also wants to find a home and a resting place in us. So there's a verse it's Ephesians 3:16 and 17, and it says, Paul's talking, he says, I pray that from his glorious unlimited resources, he will empower you with inner strength through his Spirit. then Christ will make his home in your hearts as you trust him. So as we trust God, he wants to make his home in our hearts. And I just think that's really cool how, we are seeking a resting place.
Yeah.
From the chaos of this world and everything, the burdens that we carry. But also Jesus is seeking a resting place. And he finds that in us when we trust him.
Yeah.
So I just thought that that was a word that really stood out to me in this story of her looking for a permanent home or resting place. I thought that was cool.
Well, and even that idea that it's a permanent home.
Yeah.
So when you start to tie it into our own lives and kind of the parallels with Jesus, it's this thing of, the chaos of this world and whatever, and all these things that we try to find a home in.
Yeah.
We try to find rest in all these different things. We try to find rest in career and in relationships and in money and, hobbies, some people. And you try to find rest in all these things. And it always feels like they're all so temporary because they might give you rest for a certain
season.
amount of time, a season, but it's not
permanent.
It's not sustaining. It's not permanent. And so, it's that thing of she wants to find a permanent home, a permanent place of rest. And that's what Jesus offers to us, is a permanent place. Come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, I will give you rest. Yeah. And so,
And the cool part about it to me, she says, I want to find you a permanent home so that you're going to be provided for, you're going to be taken care of. But then the next sentence is, Boaz is a close relative of ours. And he's been very kind. So it's this thing of I want to find you rest. I want to find you a permanent home. And then the next sentence is, so who is the person that she's going to be seeking? Who's the person that she's going to be looking to? It's the person who can redeem her.
Yeah.
And the same for us. If we want rest for our souls, who is the person we should be seeking? The one who can redeem us.
And it's that idea of, if you haven't listened, or just as a reminder, that redeemer. So again, Boaz is pointed out as this kinsman redeemer, this close family relative, and that spoke to a law or a custom of the people of Israel, where if a man died, if he was married and he died before he had any kids, then it was the kinsman redeemer, it was a close relative's role to take on and to marry the widow, so that they could produce an offspring or an heir, a male heir specifically, to keep the family legacy going.
Right.
And so that was why they keep pointing to Boaz as this close relative. What's interesting about it, though, is that technically speaking, that law really applied to the brother-in-law. Now, there was kind of a hierarchy. It was the brother-in-law first, and then I think it was an uncle, or so it kind of went through some different steps there. But it really wasn't nobody would have looked at Boaz any less if he didn't take on this role as kinsman redeemer for Naomi to marry Ruth. Nobody would have faulted him for doing it, because he was a close relative, but he was not the brother-in-law.
Right.
He was not
because if we remember, the
the
brother-in-law's dead.
Yeah, the brother-in-law is dead. So there really was nobody there. So while this rule was kind of there, it wasn't necessarily a foregone conclusion. It didn't have to be done. And so I thought that was just kind of interesting too, is it's going to speak to the character again
of Boaz.
Right. So this time it says it was the time of threshing and winnowing, and this was a celebration time. It was the end of harvest. They had just been harvesting, and so as when we celebrate Thanksgiving, it's at the end of harvest season. That's the whole point of Thanksgiving being there. So it was very much a time of harvest, and they were bringing in the harvest and separating it, getting it ready to sell or to store, and it was very normal. So they said, Ruth or Naomi's plan is, hey, go there, find out where he's going to be doing this, go in and watch him, and he's going to, when he falls asleep, go and do that. And so you're how does she know? So it was very common. I'm just going to talk to kind of the historical side of it. It was a very normal thing for the owner of the harvest to sleep there, because the threshing would take quite a bit of time.
Right.
A few days, and so it was very normal for the owner to sleep where the threshing was taking place, to protect.
Right, yeah.
To protect
they didn't want anybody
crops,
stealing anything.
To keep everything safe. And so that's why Naomi knew that Boaz would eventually fall asleep in that place. I'm gonna wait a second to explain the whole laying at the feet thing. There is a there's
Symbolic.
a purpose. Yeah, there's something symbolic there. There's a purpose behind it. I did want to say though, like that whole where she tells her, go put on perfume, take a bath, put on perfume, and dress in your nicest clothes. So none of this was to make her appear more attractive. It wasn't necessarily about that. In fact, the phrase "dress in your nicest clothes," it actually more indicates the translation of it. It actually points to a large outer garment. So it wasn't like go put on your fanciest dress. All right, it wasn't about that. I don't know why I said that with an accent. I don't know. Anyway, it wasn't about looking good. It was actually about disguising her, and because they didn't. If you look at it, Naomi says, "Don't let him know that you're there."
Yeah.
And so this dress in your nicest clothes was actually, it was a large outer garment that she was telling her to put on. And so it would have actually covered up and kind of hid her identity. And so it's really important as we move forward here that you understand Naomi was not preparing Ruth for a seductive moment.
Yeah.
She's not trying to be alluring
Yeah.
and try to seduce Boaz in this, because that is not
Well, I
what's
think so
happening here.
often, and we really have to be careful of this when we read the Bible, but so often we filter it through the mindset of our own society or culture or what we understand, and you have to do it. I mean, we are reading a Jewish story. Right. So you have to filter it through what were their customs, what did this mean, and you do. I'm not saying you have to be a Bible nerd, but you do have to dig a little bit. I think it's great to have a Bible that has the
Study
commentary,
Bible,
so that you can understand this kind of stuff. Yeah.
And so then it goes in verse 5 and 6 there. It says Ruth agrees and to listen and to obey Naomi. And this is the position that Ruth has put herself in. She is an outsider.
Yeah.
So she is not necessarily familiar with the customs. And so even the whole kinsman redeemer thing would be somewhat of a foreign concept to her.
Because that was God's law that was introduced to the Jewish people.
Yes. And then also this plan that Naomi was putting together has its roots in another Jewish custom that we're going to talk about here in a second. And so this really shows again Ruth's faith and trust to follow Naomi.
Yeah.
And it goes back to what she said on the road that day when Naomi says, you need to go back. And Ruth looks at her and says, no, from this point forward, where you go, I'll go. Your people are now my people.
Yeah.
Your God is my God. Where you die, where you live, I'll live. Where you die, that's where I'm going to die.
Yeah.
Like she just said, I'm following you now. I am one of you now.
Yeah.
And so it is a complete, because it would be easy for Ruth to look at all this and again misjudge what it was all about. And even I read through some commentaries and stuff like that where they're like, okay, this is a little shady looking, and there's really nothing shady to it.
Well, and I also thought it was kind of scary. You read through and people say, oh, she's trying to make a sexual and you're just like, no.
I thought it was funny, the whole thing of go in and uncover his feet, and people are like trying to read into the wording of it and try to make a leap into like this was an intimate thing. And I thought, man, there is nothing less intimate than uncovering somebody's feet in the bed. Like that's just mean.
That's mean. Unless you're hot and you kick that one leg out.
If I uncovered Joy's feet in the middle of the night, it would not be attractive to her. All right. She'd be like, why are you uncovering my feet in the middle of the night? It's cold in here. And so really what she's doing when Ruth says, listen, I'm going to follow, I'm going to listen, I'm going to obey. What she's really doing is what she's always done. Is she's saying, Naomi, I'm going to put my life in your hands. I trust you.
Yeah.
Verse 7 says how far am I going? Okay. After Boaz...
I think you should be at 5, huh? Or no. No, you're right. Sorry.
Yeah. After Boaz had finished eating and drinking and was in good spirits, he lay down at the far end of the pile of grain and went to sleep. Then Ruth came quietly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. Around midnight, Boaz suddenly woke up and turned over. He was surprised to find a woman lying at his feet. Who are you? He asked. I am your servant Ruth, she replied. Spread the corner of your covering over me, for you are my family redeemer. So again, at first glance, all right, at first glance, it looks like Naomi is encouraging Ruth to put herself into a compromising position, a position that could easily lead to immorality.
I will say though,
at first glance,
I will say though, it's like it's this thing where it was definitely like I do see she trusts Naomi, but I do feel like it was a vulnerable thing she was doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because again, and because of that, so all of these actions, and so this is what I was going to say, is like the only thing that allows you to understand that that's not the intention here is the character of all of these people.
Yeah.
The character and the reputation that we have already built and established of all of these characters is there's nothing in the characters of any of these people to point that there was any kind of seduction that was intended here, or any kind of hope of immorality, or trying to put anybody into a compromising position. Boaz had always done nothing but take steps to protect Ruth, to look out for her. He had shown himself to be a man of integrity. At the same time, we'll see it again. We've seen it a couple of times already in chapter 2, but in just a couple more verses, verse 11, Boaz will talk to Ruth and say, man, your reputation is of being a virtuous woman. And so there's all this character there that's pointing to it. So then you have to ask yourself, so if that's not the intention here, then what is the intention? What is happening? And so what was happening is Naomi is instructing Ruth to take part in a very old Israelite custom, and even something that was part of the law for the Jewish people. And what she was doing is she was really, I'm going to sum it all up really quickly, and Joy may have more to add to it, but is basically what she was doing is she's submitting herself to the care of Boaz.
Yeah.
It was not uncommon for a servant to come and to lay at the feet of the master. That sounds like such a weird concept to us, and yet it was not an uncommon thing in this context for a servant to do that. And so really what she's doing is she's submitting herself, because she's not, though he was treating her like a servant by allowing her to work with the other women in the household. He was making sure she was fed, making sure she had water, making sure she had everything she needed and was protected. This is now her submitting herself. And really it's almost a proposal of sorts. And so where it takes a turn to going just from a servant relationship to a proposal of something even greater is when Ruth asks Boaz to spread the corner of your garment over me. So when she says that, this is interesting because the word corner that's used there, you would never put this together. And this is why it's interesting to be a little nerdy sometimes, okay? Is the word corner actually comes from a Hebrew word that means wing, like wing, all right? And in fact, it's the same word that Boaz used in his prayer of blessing in chapter 2, verse 12. Let me read it for you. So this is when he first meets Ruth. And in verse 12, he says, "May the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge, reward you fully for what you have done." That word wings that he uses there is the same word, gets translated to corners, but it's actually the same Hebrew word that he prayed there. So he had prayed that she would find refuge under the wings of God. And now Ruth comes to Boaz and asks to be taken under his wing.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, I thought that was neat. So what's in this request is it's really a request of protection found within. And again, as you look into the customs and all this, she really is proposing, hey, Boaz, will you marry me? This request of protection under his wing was not just a, hey, can I come live in your house as a servant? It was, hey, will you bring me in under your wing for either for Boaz to marry her himself or to find a way for her to be taken care of permanently.
Right. And I think, like, again, we look at it through the filter of just like, oh my goodness, she asked him to marry her, you know. And
she's
so
a strong, independent woman, Joy.
But it's that thing of like, what does she do? Why would she do that? And I think it's this understanding she's coming to him because of who he is. Like, that's the part I think you have to see that aspect. Not only, yes, he's been kind to her, yes, he's done all, but she's also coming to him because of who he is. Again, it's that reference over and over again about this is the family redeemer. Why is Naomi saying go to him? Because he's the family redeemer.
Right.
Yeah. So it's the strong, basically she's saying, will you cover me with the corner of your garment? Like, will you marry me? Will you protect me? Will you, and so, and it's this thing to redeem. Will you redeem my family? Will you redeem us? So it's powerful when you look at it in the context of, it's not seductive. It's not all these. It's this thing of she's asking for him to redeem the family.
And it really is. I think you could look at it as and say it this way: is she's asking for a covenant relationship, like a promised relationship. And the reason that you can kind of go there is I don't have it, but it's in Ezekiel. Joy has it. Joy's got my back here. In Ezekiel, what?
16:8. Yeah, so there's it. So this is God speaks to, like, metaphorically, he's speaking about Israel, and it's in Ezekiel 16:8, and it says, "Later I passed by, and when I looked at you and saw that you were old enough for love," again, this metaphorically, "I spread the corner of my garment over you and covered your naked body. I gave you my solemn oath and entered into a covenant with you, declares the sovereign Lord, and you became mine." So it's that imagery of when God's using this terminology, again, because it was a custom at that time. He says, "I spread my garment over you and covered your naked body." So it's this thing of he's speaking, the context is showing God saying, "I want to be Israel's husband." Is the context of it.
And that's the same word again. So he says, "I want to spread the corner of my garment." That same corner is wing.
Yeah.
It's that same word that's used throughout there.
Another thing, too, that I found, like, I don't know, that like stood out to me is the way that Ruth comes to Boaz. So she comes to him and she lays at his feet. And you mentioned too, like in that time, it was a custom for the servants to lay at their feet. But so she lays at his feet, and then even like when she wakes him up and he's surprised and he says, "Who are you?" She says, "I'm your servant Ruth." So she lays at his feet and she says, "I'm your servant." And it really made me think again, that parallel of not only Jesus is our Redeemer, but it's like the way that we come to Jesus. So, when we come to Jesus and we ask for redemption, we ask for forgiveness, we come to his feet, and it's like this symbolic, like a submission. It's a surrenderance. And this whole thing, like where she says, "I'm your servant," And so I think that's where our heart is when we come to Jesus, and when we come to him for anything, it's like it's bowing before him in submission. So I think that was neat, the imagery,
because you see these parallels again, and this is where we're going, right?
Yeah.
Is there's these we've talked about it, that Boaz is this Christ-like character found in the Old Testament, and so how do we come to Christ? We come to Christ. The book of Romans tells us we come and we believe in our heart that he has died and rose from the dead, and we confess with our mouths that he is Lord, that he is master. The word Lord means master, and so if he's the master, then we're the servant, right? And so it's very much acknowledging she's coming to him, and she's acknowledging, "You are my Redeemer." Jesus is our Redeemer. And so it's very much the same relationship that you're seeing, where she comes and says, "I recognize that you are the family Redeemer, and so I submit myself as a servant to you." Our posture towards God matters. So much of the Bible, when you see they were laying prostrate before God, or they were bowing, or they were kneeling, and it matters. And the reason it matters, and just that symbolism, is like, I feel like so many people, when they come to God, and you've mentioned this before, but it's like they have kind of like, Jesus is my buddy. Me and Jesus are pals. Right.
And while we are friends, because he calls us his friends, and so I don't want to take away that aspect of it, but it's like this casualness that a lot of people, when they enter into a relationship with God, they don't make him Lord. The word you're using there, you don't see that they really are, with their lives and with their, here it's just the symbolism of the posture, but with their hearts really making him Lord and master.
And what's interesting is, even if you go back to the beginning of Naomi's plan here. She tells Ruth what to do, but then she just says, like, once you do all of this, she says, go and uncover his feet, lie down, and he will tell you what to do. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking back, and it's like, she never actually says in there, Boaz is going to marry you. Mm-hmm. She never says, ask Boaz to marry you. She doesn't say anything about marriage. She just says, go and submit yourself as a servant to him. Because that's really what the actions were doing. Go and submit yourselves as a servant to him.
Yeah.
And then do whatever he tells you to do. Mm-hmm. Whatever his reaction, whatever his actions will be.
Yeah.
Like go and do that and just recognize that. And so it's all it's kind of interesting, the position again that she finds herself in. And so she does it. And then we see Boaz's response in verse 10. His immediate response is, the Lord bless you, my daughter, Boaz exclaimed. You are showing even more family loyalty now than you did before. For you have not gone after a younger man, whether rich or poor. Now don't worry about a thing, my daughter. I will do what is necessary, for everyone in town knows you are a virtuous woman. But while it's true that I am one of your family redeemers, there is another man who is more closely related to you than I am. Stay here tonight, and in the morning I will talk to him. If he's willing to redeem you, very well, let him marry you. But if he is not willing, then as surely as the Lord lives, I will redeem you myself. Now lie down here until morning. So Ruth lay at Boaz's feet until the morning, but she got up before it was light enough for people to recognize each other, for Boaz had said, no one must know that a woman was here at the threshing floor. Then Boaz said to her, bring your cloak and spread it out. He measured 6 scoops of barley into the cloak and placed it on her back. Then he returned to the town. So again, we just see Boaz's reaction. Again, shows that there's nothing inappropriate that's happening. And his reaction is again to immediately to bless Ruth. Yeah. And then to marvel again at her character of, listen, you came here. You could have easily gone after a younger man that in some ways could have provided you with more. But he says, you've come and you've presented yourself to me. And he's willing to do it. He said what he's saying there. And again, the language doesn't necessarily sound super romantic, but it's actually quite romantic what he's doing here. He's saying, listen, it's not my place because there's somebody else that's closer to you. And by rights, they are the ones that should be the kinsman redeemer. But if they won't do it, then I will gladly step in the place and I will redeem you. I will marry you. When he's using that word redeem, he's talking about I will marry you. I will bring you under my wing. Yeah. All right.
And then you get the full context of when she's saying, spread the corner of your covering over me. And then a few verses down, he's saying, I will marry you. You get the context of it wasn't some seductive thing she's asking. Yeah. It was marriage. Yeah. It was, will you cover me?
She's not saying, can I get under the covers with you? All right. Well, let's just say it what it is. All right. That's the way it could look. She's not saying I want to get under the covers with you. She's saying I want to come under the wings of marriage.
Right. Yeah.
I want to do this the right
And this
way.
is why you have to read the whole thing to understand.
And then along the way, though, he also continues to protect her reputation. And so he says, stay here tonight, because what could have been perceived and what was, again, common in that day is it was common, the guys are all down at the threshing floor and they would bring in prostitutes and they would come and go in the middle of the night and all this stuff. And he's like, I don't want anybody to see you leaving this place and to read this wrong. Yeah. And so just stay here for the night and be one of the servants and stay where you are. And then in the morning you can go.
Yeah. I just think it's so cool that, she again, very vulnerable thing she's putting out there. Right. And so I just think it's amazing. Like his reaction is, the Lord bless you. Like that's his first reaction is to say, God bless you. Instead of being like, whoa, I don't know if I want to do this or not. Yeah. Let me think about this. Let me go back and pray about it. Like he's like, the Lord bless you. I think that's really cool. His reaction to her. Yeah. That shows his character too.
It shows his character. And so we just keep seeing this all the way through. And even the fact that he gives her food to take back to Naomi. So it's just this constant protection. And then it ends, chapter 3 ends with, it says, when Ruth went back to her mother-in-law, Naomi asked, what happened, my daughter? Ruth told Naomi everything Boaz had done for her, and she added, he gave me these 6 scoops of barley and said, don't go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed. Then Naomi said to her, just be patient, my daughter, until we hear what happens. that the man won't rest until he has settled things today.
Yeah.
And so again, it just shows the faith and the trust and the hope that they have in Boaz, that even if he is not the one that marries her, they have trust in him that he will make things right.
He's going to do what's necessary. Yeah. I thought it was amazing just how so what you see and how I take it in like a parallel of to us and Jesus is you see at the end where Naomi tells her, just be patient, just wait, and she kind of draws back on his character, like his reputation, basically like he's always been kind. Look, he just gave you all this barley, like it's this thing of he's always been kind. He's gonna do what it takes. He's gonna do what's necessary. And it's like, Boaz says, don't worry earlier on. And then Naomi's basically saying, don't worry, just rest in and trust him. Mm-hmm. And I really feel like that speaks to where we are and where we should be with our relationship with Jesus. And just, there's moments where we may ask for something. And it's a very, it's vulnerable to need, right? Mm-hmm. And we need God, and he is the one who not only redeems our souls, but gives us every other good thing too. Mm-hmm. And sometimes when you put yourself out there, I really feel like I've had to learn this in the waiting periods. If I've had to rest in the reputation of God, rest in the reputation of Jesus. Does that make sense? Like when you're waiting for something, because he's good. He's good. That he's going to do everything he says he's going to do. His word is true. What he tells you is true. If he says he's going to do something, he's going to do it.
Right.
So it's just, I had this parallel when I read that of sometimes in our place in life, we're in a place where we need to wait and trust in God. And he will come through because his reputation and his character is good.
Yeah.
And we see that that's the place that we kind of stopping point is now. It's like, okay, I have put my whole life in his hands, and now I wait.
And so you see this, I think, too, in just the last statement that they make. Naomi said, "Just be patient, my daughter, until we hear what happens. The man won't rest until he has settled things today."
Yeah.
And I think that's such an important thing for us to understand as we put our trust and our hope in Jesus, is that sometimes we just have to be patient.
Yeah.
And we have to put our faith in him that he will, and knowing, as you're saying, knowing the character of God, knowing the character of Jesus, knowing that he will not rest until everything is settled for us.
Yeah.
All right. Jesus is not just up there taking a nap. When you pray and you're just like, oh my goodness, I need this, I need that. If they're looking at, okay, harvest season is done, where are we going to get our next meal and all these things? Boaz gives them what they need so that they have food, and then so they're provided for until they have an answer. And so Naomi just is encouraging her with, hey, just be patient.
Yeah.
Just be patient. And we know the character of Boaz.
Yeah.
We know him. We know what he has done. We know what he's already provided. We know all this. And so we know that we can put our faith and we can put our trust in him, knowing that he will not rest
He's going to come through
until he's done what needs to be done.
Right.
And to do what only he can do. And so up to this point, Ruth and Naomi have done everything that they can do. And, I've talked about this before, is that when it comes to God does. Sometimes he asks us to do certain things, and he expects for us to not just sit back and let things happen, but there is a time where we do everything that we can do. But once we've done everything that we can do, then we trust God to do what only he can do.
Yeah.
What Boaz was about to do in chapter 4, they could not do. Boaz had to take care of it. Boaz had to make sure the next steps happened.
Yeah.
And so Ruth and Naomi, they had done everything that they could do, and now Boaz had to step in. And for us, sometimes we have to understand that we have to do everything that we can do, but then there comes a moment where we just have to be patient and let God do what only he can do, knowing that he is not going to rest until what is best for us is accomplished.
Yeah. That's good, isn't it?
All right. That is chapter 3 right there. Boom. Shakalaka.
And we got one more.
We got one more. Ruth Chapter 4 is coming up next week. So make sure you come back. And again, best way to do that, make sure you are following the podcast. Make sure you have subscribed. Click the follow button. Give us a thumbs up if you're watching on YouTube. Leave a comment somewhere else, wherever you're listening. If you can do that, if you can rate it, we'd love for you to do that. It just helps to get the word out there. And so if you're enjoying Lunch with PB&J, we'd love for you to let other people know about it as well, so more people can enjoy having lunch with us. All right? Don't keep us all to yourself.
Or coffee.
That's selfish. All right? Spread the love, everybody. So until next week, if you'd like to read ahead, go ahead and do that. But if not, we will see you right here next week on Lunch with PB&J.
Bye, guys.